Hello, everyone. This is Tom Brady, the Associate Dean for the Homeland Security Training Institute at College of DuPage, coming to you on our Zoomcast. The reason we're doing these, if you're a listener of our podcasts, obviously we're not in a studio. We're all sheltered in place. So we're doing these Zoomcasts, which is a little bit different for us, but they've been very successful. We've been talking to some of our adjunct faculty on new programs coming up, and we want to bring them to the public and make you aware of what we're doing at the Homeland Security Training Institute. And today, my guest is Rich DeVitto, and Rich has had a career in law enforcement, starting with the Chicago Police Department and then moving to the Environmental Protection Agency Office of Inspector General. So he's had a long career in law enforcement, and he's also an adjunct faculty for the Homeland Security Training Institute at College of DuPage, and he's also an adjunct faculty at Lewis University. So I'd like to bring him in. And Rich, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good, Tom.
Good, good. Hopefully you're safe and you're hunkered down there.
Yes.
Well, Rich, I want to talk a little bit today about a little bit about your career, and if we can start, could you just tell us a little bit more about your background and career in law enforcement?
Sure. As you mentioned, I got my introduction to law enforcement with the Chicago Police. I spent actually 15 years there and started as a patrol officer, and then obviously moved into quite a few investigative areas as a detective. I was a juvenile detective. I was in gangs, financial organized crime, and I ended my career there with the DEA CPD drug task force, where I was assigned as an asset forfeiture specialist.
You know, you've had obviously a long career in law enforcement, and then you obviously moved over to the EPA. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Right. I did move over from CPD to federal service, and started my career actually with the Federal Aviation Administration as a special agent there with a new unit. It was a drug investigation support unit. And then eventually through various promotions, et cetera, I moved over to the EPA Office of Inspector General, which I think was probably my most challenging federal career. As most inspector generals, we did fraud, waste, and abuse. And you could imagine there's probably over 30 or 40 different environmental programs with EPA. And I think I was exposed to most of them, from hazardous waste to lab fraud, to people dealing with pesticides, illegal pesticides, et cetera. And I actually finished up my career, retired in 2009 from the federal government, and I spent 3.5 years on a joint investigative project investigating fraud. Actually, it was fraud that was started with grant funds out in Melrose Park and moved into extortion and stealing of federal funds involving the chief of police and several of his lieutenants. Probably was the most challenging case. We were involved with the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office. Your former organization, Postal Inspection, I could go on. There was quite a few agencies. Chief Scoville was indicted, took a plea, and I think served 5 years in the federal penitentiary.
How long did that investigation last, Rich?
Oh boy, too long. Not quite. I mean, as most federal investigations, it's interesting that investigation emanated from the Cook County State's Attorney's Office. I was working with their financial crimes group on some other environmental investigations, and they brought me up to attention about the case they were looking at. They had been working it for some 2.5 years and weren't getting very far. And I told them, I said, what I'd like to do is take a good look at it and then bring it over and shop it with the U.S. Attorney's Office. And the U.S. Attorney's Office decided to adopt it. And from there, it moved forward. But number of search warrants, just tremendous amount of investigative efforts, many days and nights of surveillances, as you well know from your past experience. But it did turn out successful, so that's what counts.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, Rich, I know a lot of the work that you've done has been in the financial realm.
Yes.
You know, you're a certified fraud examiner. You've been involved in financial investigations. How did you get your start in that? Could you go back to and tell us a little bit about how you got your start in
Sure.
finances?
I was actually with the Chicago Police Department, at which time they started a financial crimes unit. And I actually was interviewed to go over there and was accepted and was a working detective in that branch for 4 years. We were aligned quite heavily. We were sponsored actually down at the Federal Law Enforcement Academy with the IRS. Every local department had a sponsoring federal agency, and we worked a lot of cases with the IRS. And I found it probably the most interesting work I had as far as an investigator, because it was challenging. It took a lot of different skill levels, auditing, accounting, several other factors were included. Plus, we were being trained on a regular basis. As I mentioned, we actually were, all of the detectives had to go down to the Federal Law Enforcement Academy and take several courses down there in financial investigations, white collar crime, et cetera. And then locally, many courses with the IRS. And from that point forward, I think I found my niche.
Mhm.
I love financial crimes. It was very challenging from the standpoint that you weren't going after a gangbanger or a drug dealer where you were arresting them and then 10 minutes later they were making bond. We perfected a lot of our cases with federal agencies. In fact, I worked with Postal on a number of cases. So the nexus was always there to team up with a federal agency, and it worked really well.
Yeah, it's a great way to, you know, work cases, obviously, in the federal side. We all rely on, you know, we know about federal law enforcement agencies, but what sometimes people don't know is how much these agencies rely on one another to have a successful investigation. They all have to work together really well.
Yes, true.
Rich, now you've moved into teaching, and there's a couple courses that you're going to be teaching for the Homeland Security Training Institute. I want to get into those in a second, but tell me about how you got into teaching. Like, what drove you to teach?
Well, it was 2009, at which time I was looking at retirement from the feds. And I had graduated from Lewis University with my master's degree and became familiar with the dean, or actually the head of the program over there, and called me in one day towards the end of my retirement and says, "What do you plan on doing?" I said, "Well, I'd like to do some teaching." And from that point forward, it was a great relationship. It worked out. I did start teaching in 2009. Um, just as a side note, in 2012, I was actually called back to the federal government for a year as what they call retired annuitant. And I was the lead agent in Chicago and what they called the Recovery Fraud Task Force, which we were going and looking and policing at a lot of programs where stimulus money was in fact being used improperly or illegally. And I went back to the government for a year. And then from that point, went back into my teaching mode. And I've been tremendously happy in that role. And I'm teaching this semester and planning on teaching also in September. I don't know what's going to happen. I think we're all kind of waiting to see what happens with the fall semester.
Right. Well, I think that, you know, based upon your career and what I know of you, you can bring a lot of experience to the classroom, and I'm sure you do that. And that's great for Lewis University. And it's going to be great for the Homeland Security Training Institute at the College of DuPage, because you have two classes that will be starting, one on June 29th and one on August 3rd. And those are going to be online classes. So people that are interested in those classes, we're going to talk about them here in a second. They're online. You know, a lot of what's going on right now with the coronavirus, a lot of education is going online. So this is our way of being able to present some great courses to our students, and be able to take part in the course from their own homes.
Sure.
The first one, Rich, is conducting workplace investigations. Could you tell me briefly what somebody would learn in a class like that?
Yeah, now this isn't new, Tom. As you know, I did this face to face once, and then obviously now being met with this challenge with the pandemic, I've been taking this course over to a Blackboard format or platform. And this course, which was done successfully face-to-face, deals with internal investigations involving both public and private sector investigators. And basically, it covers a number of different areas. I can indicate, starting probably early on the course in whistleblowers, predication of whistleblower complaints, and moves forwards to best practices in conducting internal. In fact, this is a term that we use actually synonymously with internal investigation, workplace investigation. And it deals with conducting employees in the workplace, whether you be a public or private investigator. It deals with a lot of laws, a lot of federal programs that actually regulate what you can do, deals with Department of Justice decisions on conducting internal investigations, which are necessary for public operations. We get into rights, Weingarten, Garrity, Civiletti, a lot of different rights that have to be given, whether you're a public or private employee. And it goes in quite depth. We have a number of actually live interviews of whistleblowers, both one in particular with the Chicago Police Department, and also another one with an FBI agent. So it goes into a lot of the particulars as being a whistleblower and what are some of the consequences of that. And we go into interviewing techniques. And again, like I say, we go into a lot of different areas, including even white collar crime in the workplace. So it's a good all around course. And like I say, from the critiques on it from the face-to-face, it went over very well. So I think for novice students out there that are involved in investigations in their workplace, whether they be public or private, and includes even inspector general people from some of the state and local agencies, it's a good basic introductory course for those investigators.
It sounds like a great course. Sounds very interesting. It's something we haven't really done a lot of through the Homeland Security Training Institute. So we're excited about that class. The next one, which starts on August 3rd, again, an online class, is Introduction to Environmental Enforcement. Now, I'm real interested in learning about what this one's all about, because I'm not really even sure.
Yeah. Okay. What I geared this course to specifically is local police officers, forest preserve police officers, even regulatory people within some of the local agencies, such as building inspectors that become in environmental related types of situations in the course of their duties. And basically, this is a good all-around course. It takes you through all of the medias within environmental programs. And, that would be water, land, air. It goes into those programs. It goes in specifically to the laws that impact them. It goes into a lot of different areas as far as wastewater projects. It goes into hazardous waste. It goes into the legal use of pesticides. Covers, again, most of the areas. And I think what's unique about the course is that I put a lot of my own experiences into it. Mm-hmm. In fact, we talked briefly about that Melrose Park case, because it did start off as an environmental investigation. And I think that's the beauty part of it. And I think you could appreciate it being with Postal. You don't know where these investigations are going to take you. It may even start off as a homicide with a local police officer, and they wind up making a twist or a turn. It becomes financial. It becomes environmental. And again, we deal with both criminal, civil, and administrative sanctions. And what's interesting about this course is that there's a second part of it, and I'm not quite sure how we're going to do that, but this is going to deal with evidence gathering. And I haven't actually put that all together as of this time, and investigative techniques. Now, I'm not saying that you're going to be able to be certified and go out and conduct an environmental investigation, because there's a lot of regulatory stuff, and I won't even get into that right now, that governs that. But I plan on preparing people for that eventuality, giving them at least a heads up from that point.
Yeah, it sounds like a great class. I mean, you could, and as you said, you could bring a lot of your experience to it, which I think is great. I think people, learn the best when they're dealing with someone or and learning from someone who's done these types of things. So I think that that's a real plus for the class. That's Introduction to Environmental Enforcement. That begins on August 3rd. And the other class we talked about, Conducting Workplace Investigations, begins on June 29th. And those are online classes. And if you'd like more information on that, you can go to our website, which is www.cod.edu/HSTI for the Homeland Security Training Institute. Rich, I want to thank you for taking time today to join me. I really appreciate it. And we're looking forward to your classes coming up this summer.
I look forward to it also, Tom. I'm glad for the opportunity, like I say, and I think those people that may be interested in these particular courses, I think it's certainly going to be a very interesting experience for them. And I think the part that they could take away with it is, as you know, we generally give the slides out in a format which they could keep and also use in the past. And as I always explain to people, my phone number is there, my email is there, and if they get stumped, give me a call.
Rich DeVitto, everyone. Hey, Rich, thanks a lot, and you take care of yourself and stay safe.
Okay, you too, Tom.
Thanks.
Take care.